welcome everyone to a debate among the candidates for Connecticut House District 41. This event is presented by the League of Women Voters of Southeastern Connecticut. The League is a nonpartisan organization which is open to all citizens over the age of 16, and our mission is to defend democracy and empower voters. We thank Sean Greeley and all the staff at the Groton Public Library for the use of this space this evening and for their technical support. Tonight's debate will be recorded and will be available on the Groton Municipal TV channel by tomorrow morning, maybe tonight if we're lucky. And then the links to that recording will be available for the candidates' campaigns as well. The League of Women Voters discourages the use of using sound bites from the recording, but asks you to show the debate in its entirety so that we don't appear biased towards one candidate or another. The audience will not be panned during the event. The camera will stay at the front, and we ask that you hold your applause until the end and any emotional responses until the end, please. I want to thank the three timers from the Stroptimists Club and from the League of Women Voters who will keep us on track tonight. And I want to give a big thank you to Lynnea Mahlke, a member of our League of Women Voters who will be the moderator for this evening. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Ms. Mahlke.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. The candidates have agreed to the rules of the debate, which were given to them in advance, and these are designed to allow them to each express their views and also to facilitate the sharing of ideas. Each candidate is given equal time over the course of the hour-long event. For each question, each candidate receives 90 seconds to respond. This is arranged as follows, as having three candidates is a little bit different than your standard debate with two. The first two candidates will have 60 seconds each. The third candidate will then have 90 seconds to reply, and then it goes back to the first and then again the second candidate for 30 additional seconds. So each candidate, as I said, will have 90 seconds total for each question. The questions will, of course, rotate, and starting with different individuals. During the course of the debate, each candidate has the opportunity to ask for an additional 30 seconds if there is a question they feel strongly about and would like more time for. Please request it after all three candidates have responded, and please limit this to just once, if possible. The order of questioning was determined by the candidates drawing lots just before the debate. The first question will be addressed to Mr. Boris, the second question will be addressed to Mr. Bumgardner, and the third question will be addressed to Mr. Dunigan, and then we will continue until the hour is almost done. At the end, you will have a 2-minute time period for final comments. The closing statements, as I mentioned, will be 2 minutes, and they will be held in the exact same order. Timers will hold yellow signs up indicating the candidate has 15 seconds left. That way you know how much time you've got remaining. And a red stop sign will be shown when your time is done. When the red stop sign comes up, you may, of course, finish your sentence, but please don't make me cut you off. We ask the audience to applaud enthusiastically, as Mrs. Moore said, but to hold your applause to the end, also hold any other comments, statements, and so forth. That is very much appreciated. So let's get started. It's my pleasure to introduce the candidates for state representative for the 41st House District. Republican candidate Robert Boris, Democratic candidate Aundré Bumgardner, my apologies, and candidate James Dunigan. We will start with the first question, which goes to Mr. Boris. Again, you have 60 seconds for the initial reply. Please tell us how you became interested in running for elected office and what qualifies you to be the state representative for District 41.
Thank you for the question. I'm a single dad. I have 2 daughters, and the partisan vitriol that we've experienced in the last decade at least was very disheartening, and I felt the need as a business owner, and I have a master's degree from the London School of Economics, and I felt that it was my responsibility to try to participate in the dialogue and bring solutions to the table. I felt like it was the right time, that voters were ready for people that solve problems and aren't espousing partisan politics, and I felt that I had the qualifications to participate. So that's why I stepped up, and I started to get involved in the Chambers of Commerce and other non-business entities. But like I said, I'm a job creator in Groton, and I feel that I have the capability to make a difference in my community. And so I met the call and asked for your vote.
Thank you. Mr. Bumgardner, you now have 60 seconds as well.
Thank you. First and foremost, thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this debate, and to both of my opponents for participating. I'm quite proud to be born and raised here in the town of Groton, where I've spent much of my life since I moved here at the age of 4, and to have the opportunity again to represent the 41st District. Very excited to raise a family here. The prospect of raising a family here, engaged to my fiance, Kayla, where we have gone door to door over the last few months, getting to know the issues and getting to know the folks, especially our new friends on the other side of the river in Stonington. This race is about experience. I'm the only candidate in the race with elected experience at both the state level, having previously served as state representative for the 41st District, and on the last 5 years on the Groton Town Council, as well as just having wrapped up my experience serving on the Planning and Zoning Commission in the city of Groton.
Mr. Dunigan, you now have 90 seconds.
Thank you. I am running because I, like Robert, got very frustrated with the way that we talked about policies by talking only about politics, and the way that we can't even talk to our neighbors anymore about our common problems. And that really means that interested parties who exercise significant control over our democratic process have sort of shown their cards and are taking from the common good and applying our resources to their interests. And for me, knowing and learning about how the legislature actually works through going to law school, being here, working for our biggest employer, being an engineer who knows how to solve problems, I really found that if there was going to be anyone to stand up and really change the core of how we conduct ourselves and how we create policy, then it's going to take somebody who understands how the process works and knows how to solve problems. And I have done that by being an engineer and by studying the law, studying how the legislature works, and that's what I plan to do.
Mr. Boris, you have an additional 30 seconds for this question.
I do agree with Andre's point. It is about experience, but it's not about politicians throwing out 3 E's, 5 E's, or slogans. It's about people who actually know how to solve problems, people who know how to build relationships, build bridges, people who have the work experience, educational background to navigate Hartford and to bring solutions back and represent Groton and Stonington well. And that's the kind of experience we need.
Thank you. Mr. Bumgardner, you have 30 additional seconds.
Certainly, I think certainly my family and my friends can attest that I've been very proud of my educational experiences. I'm very proud of the service that we've contributed to this community. And I can't stress enough the importance of developing bipartisan relationships. I should be elected. I'll be elected as a Democrat, but I already have existing relationships up in Hartford. I'm the only candidate in the race who's actually done the job. So it is vitally important that we have a voice who does not need training wheels on day one.
Thank you. The second question, we will begin with Mr. Bumgardner, and you will have 60 seconds to begin. Question number 2. What would be your top 2 priorities for the next legislative session? What bills would you sponsor and which would you support? 60 seconds.
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, we need to focus on what I call the 5 E's, but in this case, we're going to talk about our 2 priorities. So first and foremost, focusing on our economic recovery. That includes investing in our small businesses, We have no shortage of restaurants in our community that really are experts in the farm-to-table or sea-to-table movement, whether it's Oyster Club or Dog Watch or so many other wonderful eateries within our downtown core that, as a town councilor, have supported over the last few years, and certainly as a state representative. Also, we are home to Electric Boat and Pfizer. We are seeing no shortage of youth and young people coming into our community, so that we must continue to invest in apprenticeships and job training programs, as we've done already through our vocational programs and certainly community colleges. And lastly, targeted tax cuts for our middle-class families. The second priority is energy affordability, and we'll get to that in our rebuttals.
Mr. Dunigan, you have 60 seconds.
For me, my number one priority and sort of the reason I'm running is that in order to solve our common problems, we need a system that is more reflective of our shared interests. And right now, the system that we have in drawing districts in particular means that we get redder and bluer districts, and it allows for more extreme positions overall. And I think if we're going to solve problems generally, we're going to need a system that allows us to vote our conscience, so I would support a bill that would allow for ranked choice voting. I would support a bill that would create a nonpartisan commission to draw the district maps. And as my time is limited, my second priority would be for our energy future. If we're going to rely on intermittent sources, we need grid-level energy storage. We need it now, and we need it to be owned by the public and the ratepayers and not individuals and corporations.
Mr. Boris, you have 90 seconds.
90 seconds? Okay, thank you. So my first priority is the economy and affordability. Unfortunately, inflation is rampant, and I have to apologize for a lot of my alumnus at the LSE. They're the ones in Washington that decided to print money like a drunk sailor. And unfortunately, there's a backlash that we need to prepare for. There's not a lot we can do about what's coming, but we need to prepare for it on the state level. 80% of the dollars in circulation have been printed in the last 2 years. So we need to immediately figure out how to mitigate the impact on our working families. We need to figure out how to get through the winter with affordability for home heating oil. And most of all, this problem isn't going to go away in the next 2 years. You need someone like myself that's an economist that understands this high inflationary environment and to fight that battle up in Hartford as we set priorities for the next few years. We obviously also another high importance is education. We have a lack of health care of people in our community. We could work with the medical magnets at schools to create a pipeline where kids can come out of school with accreditation to take care of the seniors in our community. We have excellent trade schools. We need to enhance that. Robotics program at Fitch can be enhanced to put coding learning in there. There's a lot of things that we can do to create assets that we have here, accentuate it, and make it better. Thank you.
Mr. Bumgardner, you have an additional 30 seconds.
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, Eversource has a small army of lobbyists up in Hartford. One of the learning experiences I had in our time up in Hartford, in the legislature, and we already know the ethics issues that CMEC experienced quite a few years ago now. I'm the only candidate in the race that has experience working on energy issues up in Hartford, and what I hear at the doors, especially from folks living in Noank or Mystic and certainly in Stonington, is that they would like ratepayer choice, to have the ability to join a electric utility.
Mr. Dunigan, an additional 30 seconds.
So my two priorities, which are to fix, I think, fundamentally the system, to cut off the extremes on either end and sort of bring us back to the middle, I stick by that. And I do believe energy affordability at its core means a strong grid that can support intermittent systems. But to the affordability piece, I believe fair wages would be what I would follow up with, and I think it ties into how we address the other two issues.
Thank you, gentlemen. The next question, we will begin with Mr. Dunigan.
Oh, nice.
No, it gets a little different.
Yeah.
Question number 3. According to the Connecticut Insider's poll of likely voters last week, taxes were one of the top concerns for Connecticut voters. Do you see a way to alleviate the tax burden on Connecticut citizens? What changes would you recommend to the state tax system, both for small and large businesses as well as for individuals? Mr. Dunigan, you have 60 seconds.
Thank you very much. A couple of things on taxes. I think number one of our major cost drivers in Connecticut for taxes is Husky Care, which covers over a quarter of the population. And many of the people who are on Husky are part-time employees or employees at companies that are unwilling to provide benefits. Those companies are relying on you and I, the taxpayer, to ensure that their workforce is healthy, and that's criminal. They are not providing a fair life for those who work diligently, and that's something that needs to be addressed. And I believe that if we allow employers to provide Husky Care at cost or at a discount, the numbers need to be certainly hashed out, that we could reduce the tax burden of most of us by providing benefits to our neighbors and holding employers accountable. And I will yield the rest of my time.
Mr. Boris, you have 60 seconds.
Thank you very much. As I touched upon in my last answer, we could do things related to home heating oil and gas immediately. I think obviously the tax burden needs, in any area we can, we need to relieve the tax burden on and make Connecticut more affordable in general. One of the problems we have in this state is the overall tax burden makes Connecticut uncompetitive. We're not at the top of any list for anybody looking to locate their companies in our state. So we can look at property taxes. There's specific issues we could address for our elderly, suspending increases of property taxes after a certain age to make people be able to afford to retire in the community that they raise their children in. I approach this also as a growth thing. It's not just cutting taxes. We need to say yes to the appropriate development and have the common sense to green light development that fits with the character and nature of our communities.
Thank you. Mr. Bumgardner, you have 90 seconds.
Yes, so since Governor Lamont has taken the oath 4 years ago, Connecticut has record surpluses. We are on a path to fiscal, we've gotten off the path of fiscal irresponsibility. About 4 years ago, the legislature passed a bipartisan budget that got Connecticut again on a strong financial path now. We have strong reserves, just like we do in the town of Groton, working with our Democratic Council to ensure that we have at least 15% of our fund balance set aside, or 50% of our operating budget set aside in our fund balance. So first and foremost, we need to continue making targeted tax cuts for our working middle-class families. That includes preserving the child tax credit, which was introduced the last couple of years, has provided significant relief to families, especially families with young children. Obviously, inflation has hit our families from Groton City all the way to Stonington Borough very hard. And one significant relief was obviously the holiday on motor vehicle gas taxes. And so at the bare minimum, we need to continue that, especially given the increased prices at the pump that we've seen in the last couple of weeks. But we need to invest in our working families. We need to prioritize our seniors, especially that are living on a fixed income. We don't want them to go to Florida. We want them to retire here, stay here, and not be taxed out of their own home.
Mr. Dunigan, you have an additional 30 seconds.
Thank you very much. I'm going to agree with Aundré that the gas tax holiday should be continued into the near future while we deal with inflation and as a key cost to a lot of people, even just getting to work to earn their money. That's a tough one. But the surplus is somewhat inaccurate in that it's not reliable. It's based a lot on funding from the federal government due to the pandemic and on sales of the last 2 years of stock that, excuse me, ma'am, have resulted in the surplus that aren't reliable going into the future.
Mr. Boris, you have an additional 30 seconds.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, comment about the surplus that Aundré mentioned. It's poor judgment if you think that's anything to do with fiscal management. That's to do with the flood of money from Washington being dumped into our area. We need to prepare for, it's a high inflationary market that we're entering in here. We've created a ton of cash coming in from the federal government, and we're going to have to prepare to fund programs that we've set up. And yeah.
Thank you very much. Question number 4, we begin with the first candidate again. So Mr. Boris, that would be you for 60 seconds. Mental health services are in high demand, higher than ever. People are suffering around the state with far too few mental health providers and services available. What do you see as the solution to this? And what is your commitment to addressing the needs of so many? 60 seconds.
Me first?
Yes.
Okay, great. So that gets me back to the educational pipeline that we can do in our schools. We can start by funding and being sure that our healthcare providers are coming out of high school and being able to take care of the elderly and other people in our community in need. I think I've touched upon this in other conversations before. The issues with the internet and access to information and fake news, it's causing a lot of stress and loneliness and confusion, and that severely impacts our children. There's some studies that the state has funded that I think are going to, we need to pay close attention to and fully support our children as we figure out how to have them cope in the modern era with all this information coming at them. I think mental health is a serious issue, and it's a driver of so much of the problems that we have. So I would work very hard to do everything I could.
Mr. Bumgardner, you have 60 seconds.
Thank you. That's a very important question impacting, I think, every family in this district. I'm very proud to have the support of the national organization, Connecticut Chapter, National Organization of Social Workers here in Connecticut. Since I was elected to the legislature and on town council, in my private life, very strong advocate for mental health reform in our state. Again, each of us have been impacted in our own unique ways as our families. And here in Groton, for example, we've made targeted investments in many of our departments, and case in point, our police department, where now we have social workers integrated within the police department, responding to calls for help. And that is absolutely important that we continue to make those investments. Obviously, ensuring that we have social workers within our schools, and making sure that we have no shortage of. Thank you.
You're allowed to finish the sentence.
Yes.
That's okay.
Yes, and no shortage of social workers interacting with our students, and so they have an understanding of what's happening outside of the classroom as well.
Thank you. Mr. Dunigan, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you very much. One of the things that we can do sort of short term is that, yes, here in Connecticut we are low on resources, but if we can look to license remote providers of services, I think that can help while we bridge the gap to training a workforce and enticing a workforce who is capable of handling mental health crises. I'm also pretty appalled by several patients who, instead of being able to seek a mental health doctor, have to go to the emergency room, particularly on hospice care, and spend days, sometimes weeks, in the emergency room, and that's because we don't have any inpatient facilities that are reliable for providing the kind of services that people really need. So I would be interested in seeing Connecticut look to creating several inpatient facilities, at least in a county range or within an hour of everyone who lives in Connecticut would so we're talking about maybe 5 facilities. And to fund those and to entice people to come work there with the kind of resources that they need. I yield.
Thank you. Mr. Boris, you have 30 seconds.
Magnify what Jake said. I think we need to look all across the board, and we also need to really listen. We have, part of our substance abuse crisis and our opioid crisis has driven a lot of ignored mental health issues, underfunded programs, and I think, you know, we need the community, we need to listen to what the community needs and fund more of the things that are working and divert money away from things that aren't working. And this is where we need to get a bipartisan approach. We need to not have our pet projects. If it's working, do more of it. If it's not, less.
Mr. Bumgardner, you have 30 seconds.
Yes, I'm glad Jake brought up that very important point about inpatient services. We saw back in, after the state closed down the North State Hospital, the impacts it would have on our region, certainly as far as addiction, obviously, you know, mental health, but addiction goes as well. So, you know, this takes resources, and that takes targeted investments at the state level. So we can't cut our way from that. We have to invest in those areas, and we have the solutions to do it.
Thank you. Next question is question number 5. Mr. Bumgardner, we'll start with you for 60 seconds. Climate change is no longer a hypothesis, but is evidenced in storms and drought. Groton has already taken some steps towards both mitigation and resilience. What steps would you support at the state level to both mitigate climate change and to improve our resilience against it? Again, beginning with Mr. Bumgardner for 60 seconds.
Absolutely. Well, any person who watches our council meetings or has seen the work we did up in Hartford knows how passionate I am about climate action, about coastal resilience. I'm very proud to have the support of the Connecticut League of Conservation Voters, Sierra Club, and the Sunrise Movement Connecticut chapter, in large part because of their recognition of the work we've done in our community, not just talking the talk, but walking the walk. First and foremost, Groton and Stonington will face 20-inch sea level rise by 2050, according to Circa, based out of Yukon Avery Point. And our community is inadequately prepared for those rising sea levels, the rising temperatures, and the impacts it will have, a disproportionate impact it will have on our most vulnerable citizens. That includes tackling our solid waste crisis, diverting more waste to compost and recycling, reducing the amount of plastics that we have in our state, just like we did here in Groton on the town council, passing the strongest plastics reduction ordinance in the state. And that means investing in our infrastructure here in our community.
Mr. Dunigan, 60 seconds.
I couldn't agree more. Plastic is trash. It's such garbage. I hate it. Which is why all of my signs are made out of pallets from the dump. Because I really honestly believe that our consumer choices are part of how we got to where we are. So one of the things that about mitigation that I've already talked about is that if we're going to rely on intermittent sources, we need grid level energy storage, and we need to invest in that now. There's a new battery facility going up in Preston by 2025, but that's not going to be enough. We need to be doing more. And as we talk about recycling and our consumer choices, we need to be thinking about incentivizing more resilient packaging. In particular, glass has a higher recyclability rate than plastic does and requires less energy to do. We should be incentivizing the use of that, and I commend the town for doing the plastic bag removal, because I just said to my wife yesterday that I haven't used one in 2 years, and I'm impressed by that. So,
Mr. Boris, you have 90 seconds.
90 seconds? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, climate change is a global issue. It needs to be addressed nationally, and we can vote on this issue every day in the way we spend our money. That's the most effective way we can impact climate change. We can spend your dollars on net zero companies, incentivize that. The truth of the matter is, Connecticut is 1% of the US population. We could turn Connecticut into an Amish colony, shut off the lights, kill our industry, and we would not move the needle on global climate change. Doesn't mean we shouldn't be active on it, but we need to get it in proportion. What we can do and what we should do is focusing on preparing for climate change. Aundré made the point, and it's true, 20-inch sea level rise by 2050. So what we need to do, and what I would do, is be sure that our coastal resiliency plans for Groton, Greater Mystic, and Stonington are fully funded. Money is not diverted. We harden the shoreline. We create jobs doing that, and we focus on preparing for the effects of climate change. And we also change our behaviors. It doesn't mean we should be irresponsible. We do need to have policies related to plastics and other things, but we need to keep it in perspective. If you really want action on this, and if it really is that important, it needs to be addressed at the national level. We are 1% of the entire US population. Whatever we do here isn't going to affect the root causes of it. We can mitigate and prepare, and that's what I would do.
Mr. Bumgardner, 30 seconds.
Well, when tough challenges impact our community, we don't divert it to the federal government. We tackle it right here at home, just like we've done on the council, and like we'll continue to do up in Hartford. You mentioned, my Republican opponent mentioned hardening our coastline, and several studies show that may not always be the best solution. We should let nature do its course. We should allow living shorelines, just like we did partnering with our U.S. Senator, the town of Groton partnering with our U.S. Senator to get $750,000 to build a living shoreline at Esker Point Beach.
Mr. Dunigan, 30 seconds.
It's important for each of us to take responsibility for our actions, regardless of how one individual's impact has on the rest of the world. You've got to be accountable for what you do. And so when you can, you've got to make the best choice for the future generation, and that means working for climate change now at every level.
All right, the next question, we will begin with Mr. Dunigan. You'll receive 60 seconds. Southeastern Connecticut's economy is heavily dependent on the military-industrial complex. Do you believe economic diversification is important? And if so, what will you do to support diverse and innovative industries? 60 seconds. Mr. Dunigan, beginning with you.
Great question. I have been in the defense industry for 15 years. I was also a small business owner in there for a hot second when I lost all my money. But the defense industry has provided me with a great life and great jobs and really a purpose. For me in particular, it was about developing nuclear power more than anything. It was a pathway to me for that. And I think here, one of the things that we could diversify in is the manufacture of nuclear products and to support the industry nationwide because we have the talent and the skills and education and the workforce. I also believe that we have a strong biopharma organization here and that we should be incentivizing small biopharmas to be looking for curative and preventative measures that aren't incentivized on the market by Connecticut funding those companies in order to give them an incentive other than profit to develop curative measures.
Mr. Boris, 60 seconds.
Well, my company works in the defense industry. We support the United States Air Force and the Navy, and I'm very proud to do that, so I know a lot about that. I'm a job creator. I've created over 100 jobs in this district over the last 20 years. I understand business. I have a master's degree in economics. We need leadership here. We need somebody who understands how to attract the right development, understand how investors in our communities think, understands how to say yes to the right development and no to the wrong development, how to vet a developer that has a criminal record and not have to change your mind after, as Aundré did with the oral school project, and also to not be confrontational. We want people to bring us projects, and we can turn them down and say no thank you, but we do not need to be obnoxious. We do not need to be redlined as an area where someone doesn't want to come with an investment. And that's the kind of knowledge you need. You need somebody to create a climate where people are, the jobs are thriving and people want to invest.
Mr. Bumgardner, 90 seconds.
Yes, a very important question. While I may not have inherited a defense contractor firm from my father or worked as an engineer at Electric Boat, I work with our service members every day through Navy housing. And that is vitally important that even if we do not contribute to developing our next generation of submarines, that we serve and take care of the service members back at home who put their lives on the line every day defending our nation. And I'm proud of that service. And as far as growing and diversifying our economy, as I mentioned earlier, that's investing in our restaurants, it's investing in the artisans We all participated in a panel recently about investing in arts and culture. We obviously live in one of the tourist meccas of New England, home to Mystic Aquarium and Mystic Seaport. But as was mentioned, we also have to learn how to manage that growth. And I think any person who has lived in town long enough will certainly know that I have questioned many development proposals in Groton. Case in point, working in partnership with Portia Bordelon, for example, one of our town councilors, who I'm proud to have the support of, to defeat the data center proposal. To this date, my Republican opponent still has not been clear about where he stands on that proposal that would have disproportionately impacted neighborhoods on both Mystic and Groton. So let's talk the facts here. Let's also talk about that I've been outspoken about the short-term rental issues on our town council. Let's also be clear that I oppose the Mystic Oral School $1 sale.
Mr. Dunigan, 30 seconds.
Tourism is important. It's another one of those industries that we have here. It's cyclical. It does mean that there are several people who come in and out of the district in order to support those businesses. What I'd love to see is supporting those people on sort of the back end in the low seasons. We need to make sure that if we're going to have a strong tourist economy, that we consider the yearly employment of these people so that they can live full lives that have and have job prospects that make sense for the entire year.
Mr. Boris, 30 seconds.
Great. Well, obviously, Aundré doesn't know my family history, and maybe he should go to my Facebook page and read the story about my dad coming here when he was 14 from a relocation camp in Germany. I worked in my family business, and we built what we have. And one thing voters need to understand is Aundré hasn't held the same job for more than a year. And I think that's really important for you to understand. I've created jobs. I don't really understand how Aundré thinks he can create jobs. He's a politician. I'm a job creator. I've worked in a family company, and I've earned what I've created.
Next question, we will begin with Mr. Boris for 60 seconds. Traffic on I-95 continues to be a headache for tourists, residents, and truckers alike. In addition to inconvenience and safety of traffic jams, the use of gas engines contributes significantly to climate change. Do you support investing in mass public transit, including free buses for all that run much more frequently, bike pedestrian infrastructure, investment in Amtrak as a public service in the same way the highway system has been invested in? Sorry, it's a long question. What steps do you think the state legislature could take to improve transportation, and what bill would you introduce or support? Again, beginning with Mr. Boris for 60 seconds.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think public transit is extremely important, and I think it touches upon a lot of our housing issues and other issues that we have about increasing development and access in our communities. I would support extension of Shoreline East. We had a discussion at a panel earlier in the Arts Council related to creating traffic and economic development through having public availability of transportation so that everyone in our community can benefit from the arts and educational opportunities. I also think having public investment in public infrastructure allows us to build housing and bring in people from other areas where it's less expensive. That we can deal with the issues of hiring at Electric Boat, and so I'm a strong supporter of all options of transportation infrastructure investment. It's a job creator and it's a no-brainer.
Mr. Bumgardner, 60 seconds.
Thank you. Well, first and foremost, the less time our families spend on 95, the more time they can spend in our communities or where they can work and play. And it is absolutely critical that we make targeted investments in a multimodal transportation system here in Southeastern Connecticut. On the town council, I've supported the hard work of Zell Stever, who serves on the Connecticut Commuter Rail Council, to build a train station here in Groton, to extend Shoreline East into Mystic, beyond the Rhode Island border, and the potential for rail service going up to Norwich, investing in our sidewalks, in our roads, I authored the Complete Streets policy, unanimously passed by the Town Council, that prioritizes pedestrian and cyclist safety. We need to ensure that all users of the roads, whether it's, and certainly folks in the trains, have the opportunity to get around to where they work, and as a former member of the Transportation Committee in Hartford, have the experience to make it happen.
Mr. Dunigan, 90 seconds.
Thank you very much. Transportation, commuting generally means that your job isn't where you live. And to me, I'm not so sure that that helps climate change overall. If we need to start fostering communities where you can live and work. And part of that is affordable housing. And if you don't have affordable housing in the town where you work, then you're commuting. So that's first and foremost, you got to be able to afford where you work. And to me, we already had a trolley in town. There are options that are out there, particularly to help the parking problem in Mystic. In the state legislature, I would fund research into how to address intercity, intra-city transportation, and fund research into, we're going to have autonomous cars soon enough. There's no reason why we can't have autonomous public transit, and I think that that would help significantly, particularly if you live in the town where you work. In terms of extending Shoreline East, I think it's a great idea. One of the things that we also need to do with that in conjunction is that if we're going to get traffic from New York out here to Mystic, they need return passengers. We need to be building relationships along the shoreline to ensure that the system is sustainable, because if we don't have those kind of relationships and we don't have the kind of traffic going both ways, we're not going to be able to afford to keep the train running, because we're going to be subsidizing it overall.
Mr. Boris, an additional 30 seconds.
Yeah, just to reiterate, Shoreline East is a no-brainer. That needs to happen. That should go all the way into Providence, and I think that would do a lot for economic development. But Jake touched upon a point. We need to develop third spaces here to keep people who are working at Electric Boat and in our local communities spending their money locally and having places for them to go and be social. We talked about mental health issues. One of the problems, in the COVID era, we've all been isolated so much, and young people, need a place, especially if they're doing more work at home, a place to go and be social and interact and have a higher quality of life. So, in conjunction with transportation, we need to look at all the developmental aspects here, and I have the experience doing that.
Mr. Bumgardner, 30 seconds.
Well, let's not lose sight of the fact that families in our district rely on public transportation for survival. They may not have a motor vehicle. And so we want to build our community in a way that allows folks to move around without needing a vehicle, and that's obviously better for the environment as well. So I'd like to work with our governor to ensure that we continue fare-free bus service. I serve on the SEAT board, where I've worked in partnership, for example, with the First Select Woman of Stonington to ensure that micro transit will continue to be funded as well.
Thank you. Next question goes back to Mr. Bumgardner, and it's actually kind of tying into this existing one. There's a nationwide shortage of housing, especially starter homes and affordable housing. What bill would you introduce or support to help families find safe and affordable housing? Mr. Bumgardner, you have 60 seconds.
Absolutely. Well, again, I have worked on these issues on the town council and as a legislator, most recently holding Branford Manor's management company related in default of the tax stabilization agreement. The city of Groton has yet to do that. The town of Groton, we led the fight on that, and I'm so proud that we will continue to stand with the families of Branford Manor to ensure that they are getting the health, the relief they need. As far as housing goes, I endorsed by the Connecticut Realtors Association. I'm very pleased to also be someone who is growing up here and looking to start a family. And obviously, housing prices have gone through the roof. I think short-term rentals certainly contribute to that unaffordability, and so we ought to take a look at some of the statutes as it relates to STRs at the state level as well. But I'd like to invest in first-time home buyer programs as well.
Mr. Dunigan, 60 seconds.
First and foremost, we do not have affordable housing, period, here on the shoreline. And one of the reasons for that is that people aren't being paid fair wages. I could go on for an hour about that, but I'll leave that there. One of the things that we can do in the short term to make things affordable, I would be in favor of a mansion tax of the properties over $3 million, funding first-time home buyer credits, or at least to back a loan for first-time home buyers through the state of Connecticut. I feel my philosophy generally is that taxes on specific taxes should go to specific causes. If we're going to solve housing overall, I think that just like a graduated income tax, a mansion tax would support a system to allow for first-time home buyers to at least apply and get a loan at a reasonable rate.
Mr. Boris, 90 seconds.
90 seconds? Okay, great. First of all, I have to address the fact that Aundré keeps referring to his time in Hartford as experience. I would not say an unsuccessful 2 years, an unremarkable 2 years is experience. You weren't reelected. The other issue there is, bluntly speaking, Branford Manor was let down when Aundré was up in Hartford. He had the opportunity to use his voice at that time. The mold issue is systemic and been going on for over 20 years. He failed to speak up. That's a problem. Our most vulnerable rely on our legislators to know what they're doing, to know how to hold people accountable, and to pay attention. And if we don't do that, we will not be able to have our communities have faith in building more affordable housing is part and parcel of that. I've had a real estate broker's license for 20 years. I understand this. I understand how to attract investors to our community. I understand the metrics they need. And again, I understand how to say yes to a developer who can perform and no to developers who have criminal records and don't pay their workers. That's why I'm supported by the Connecticut Building Trades, because I care about the working people in this community. And I understand that a thriving community requires jobs, and sustainability is also about families being able to put their kids through school and saying yes and bringing in the right developments, not throwing temper tantrums, creating an environment where developers stay away. That is unprofessional, and that's what's been done.
Mr. Bumgardner, you have 30 seconds.
Yes, well, I'm not here to debate my Republican opponent. I'm here to illustrate to this district why I'm the most qualified for this race. So first and foremost, as far as the home buyers program, I like Jake's idea, and I'd like to sit down with you and talk about that. And so, you know, there are no shortage of families that really cannot afford a home with a water view, that's for sure. Most folks in this district live paycheck to paycheck. I grew up and continue to live in the shadows of Branford right next door, and talk to any of those families and they'll know whose side I'm on.
Mr. Dunigan, you have 30 seconds.
Certainly. So I am sustainability is at my core, and I'm a landlord as well. Beyond, and I also have my realtor's license for a little while. I understand the concerns that realtors have, and their livelihood there, and builders overall too. We have some pretty stringent building code requirements here in Connecticut, and there are some municipalities who are looking for these stretch goals. I want to make sure that we keep a cap on that. I'm losing the ball a little bit here, but the point is that if we really need affordable housing, and we need responsible landlords to provide it.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Time is flying by. We're going to move now into the final comments. Each candidate will have 2 minutes, and we will begin with Mr. Boris. Timer's 2 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to run here. As we discussed earlier, the motivation to it. I'm a single dad, and my parents came here. My dad came here when he was 14 with nothing, with 4 suitcases, and we worked together. He started at Soup Ship, cashed in his retirement. My mom is a registered nurse, and she and he opened the company, and we worked hard, and I was able to appreciate the American dream right here in the 41st. And I'd like to see that opportunity for our kids here. I'd like to continue to see that vision happen. And I have the experience of doing that. I have a master's degree in economics from the London School of Economics, and I think it's never been more important for us to choose experience. We're going to have, we have some challenges in our district. We have inflationary issues here, and Aundré is a nice kid, but he doesn't have the work experience to do this. We don't need politicians. We need problem solvers. We need people out there who know how to stand up for Branford Manor, who know how to bring in developers, who know how to communicate, to build relationships. Aundré's relationship in Hartford is awful. He is not bipartisan. He burned bridges up there. He burns bridges everywhere. We do not need that. I don't mean to be harsh. This is very important. The 41st needs people who have the experience to advocate for what we need in our district and bring things home. When he was there for 2 years, it was undistinguished, did not bring things home, did not support Branford Manor. It's unacceptable. I don't mean to be negative. I want people to understand. It's really critical. I believe I have the experience. I'd like the opportunity. I'd be very grateful and very honored to represent everyone in this community, rich, poor, every aspect. My family and I built what we have from the ground up, and I want to make other people have that opportunity too.
Mr. Bumgardner, you have 2 minutes.
Well, one thing I've learned spending my entire life here in the town of Groton is that we don't tear people down, especially our neighbors. We build each other up. This district is about issues. This district is about the people we serve. This race is about moving forward. I am committed to Groton. I'm committed to Stonington, just as I've been committed as your former representative, as your town councilor, as a brother, as a son, as a fiance, as the proud dad of Lola, our 2-year-old pup. It is absolutely critical that we have a leader up in Hartford that knows the residents, is intimately familiar with the issues impacting our community, who is willing to work across party lines, roll up our sleeves, work with Republicans in this district, just like I do on the town council, just like we have done on our boards and commissions. It is imperative that we have a voice that is on the side of working families, that is on the side of women's reproductive health issues, that is on the side of climate action, that is on the side of having strong schools, and will hold other legislators accountable that are our voice. I am Aundré Bumgardner, your Democratic candidate for state representative. It would be an honor to be your voice again up in Hartford. In those short 2 years, boy, we had a lot of challenges, my own personal challenges, but as well as challenges impacting the community. And we rolled up our sleeves, we didn't complain about it, and we did the people's work. That's what this district knows. That's what Stonington Borough knows. That's what Noank knows, Lord's Point, Latimer Point, Noank, Groton Long Point, the city of Groton, Pequannock Bridge, communities I have walked and listened to since April, listening to their concerns. I don't need training wheels. I've done the work in Hartford, and perhaps folks would know that if they were from here and they've had a little bit more experience here as well.
Mr. Dunigan, closing comments, 2 minutes.
I chose to run because I was tired of the tone. I chose to run because I honestly believe that the systems and structures that we have in place are a detriment to the public good and the public interest. And for me, the only way to change that is to introduce change, a catalyst. What we do in creating laws now are extremely complex documents that are not intended for you and I to typically understand. And they expressly serve interests of those who are able to expend excess resources to gain an advantage over the public. Your job as a voter is to hire someone to represent your interests. Your job as a voter is to understand who it is that you're going to send to Hartford on your behalf, and that takes work. The system we have in place is relying on you to be lazy. It's relying on you not to do the work. And I know, especially those of you here, you're willing to do it. Democracy requires you to understand what each of us is going to represent when we're sent to Hartford. If you could, go to my website, your41st.org. There's a lot there about what my ideas are, what I can do. There's all the interviews from the day. This event is a good demonstration of what our styles and ideas represent. But more than anything, I ask you to do the work. Thank you.
On behalf of the League of Women Voters, I would like to thank everybody for coming out this evening despite the rain. And a special thank you to our candidates, Republican candidate Robert Boris, Democratic candidate Aundré Bumgardner, and candidate James Dunigan. We appreciate you taking the time.